This is the seventh in a series of webinars. The latest one was on the Net Zero Industry Act, and hopefully seventh, but not last. And today our focus will be on the European Wind Power Action Plan. So we'll welcome three distinguished guests to present the action plan and the status of implementation. Then to discuss latest investment trends in the wind energy sector, and we will then deep dive on the counter guarantee scheme put in place with the Commission and the European Investment Bank to support the wind sector. So feel free to participate. We have two Q&A sessions. So the idea is to make this as interactive and lively as possible on the Teams format. And with that, I will give the floor to Anna Porumbrica from DG Ener for her introduction.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Investors Dialogue in Energy webinar on the Wind Energy Action Plan. Actually, Penelope said already a lot of things I wanted to say, so I will be brief. The Wind Energy Action Plan was approved in October 2023. So as we talk today, I think it's a good moment to take stock of the progress made on the plan. It is an ambitious plan that targets the development of wind energy in Europe, and we believe it has the potential to play a significant role in driving our energy transition. Also, Investors Dialogue in Energy is mentioned in point 9 of the Wind Energy Action Plan, so as being an important stakeholders engagement mechanism. So it is very, very important that we talk about this within the Investors Dialogue. As you know, the inputs from Investors Dialogue are part of the Commission investment strategy in energy, which will be part of the Clean Industrial Deal, which is something that Ursula von der Leyen made clear in the mission letter of our new Commissioner designate for energy. So it is something we are working on and will be part of the new Commission from next year. As Penelope already said, we will have three parts of the webinar. The first will be a presentation of the Wind Power Action Plan, exploring the objectives, timelines, milestones. Secondly, we will discuss the current and future investment trends in wind energy, analyzing opportunities and challenges that investors face at this point. And thirdly, we will learn about the European Investment Bank's counter guarantee scheme designed to support investments in wind power projects and its potential in de-risking investments and promoting project finance. So please feel free to participate, to come in at any time, and looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you very much, Anna. So now I will give the floor to Alessandro Polito from DG Ener for a presentation, so first presentation of today on the Wind Power Action Plan. And maybe, Alessandro, you can start by a quick introduction of yourself.
Thank you, Penelope. Good morning, everybody. Alessandro Polito from DG Energy. I work in the unit in charge of renewable energy and energy system integration. I have quite a wide portfolio, but one of my main tasks is to deal with issues related to manufacturing and competitiveness of renewable energy technologies. So that's why I've been following some of the key files in this respect, including the Net Zero Industry Act, and I was involved in the drafting of the European Wind Power Action Plan, and in general coordinating also here in our unit colleagues responsible for different technologies for assessing matters related to manufacturing and competitiveness. Can I go on with the presentation, Penelope?
Please do.
Okay, thanks a lot. So the Wind Power Action Plan was adopted last year in October. It was an urgent action from the Commission, let's say, because there was a quick deterioration of the situation of wind manufacturers in the EU. The wind industry undergoes some major setbacks during the last couple of years, and so we realized there was the need to intervene. It's a package very much focused on manufacturing, but some of the actions are not specifically linked to manufacturing, are more linked to deployment. But we also realize and we believe that a fast deployment is the first and main recipe to address also manufacturing problems. That's why there is this mix in the package. Why did we focus on wind specifically? We realized and we wanted to highlight the importance of wind energy in the EU under many aspects and many respects. First of all, we have a broad target, a 42.5% share of renewables in the energy mix by 2030, which means almost doubling compared to our share of renewables in 2022. This means that we will need a strong contribution from all renewables, and wind will have a key role there. Our estimates, our modeling foresees a more than doubling of the share of renewable electricity covered by wind. So from 16% of all electricity supplied today coming from wind in Europe to 34%. It means that the installed capacity for wind will need to more than double from 204 gigawatts that it was in 2022 to around 500 gigawatts. And this means also that annual installations will have to grow from 16 gigawatts per year to around 37 gigawatts per year. We know that there are different estimates. WindEurope, for instance, has different data according to which the annual installations could be a bit lower because they count on an increase of the capacity factor for wind turbines, higher efficiency of wind turbines. But overall, the message doesn't change much. We need to almost or around double our rate of installation to double also the production of electricity coming from wind. Wind is also fundamental from an economic and employment perspective. We have between 240,000 to 300,000 people working in the wind sector in the EU, and this is expected to increase. I don't remember the latest figures, but I think it's around 500,000 jobs in 2030. We have in Europe 4 of the 10 biggest manufacturers, either they are Europeans or with a strong presence in the EU. I'm referring particularly to GE, which is American, but with a strong presence in the EU, especially for offshore. Other big manufacturers are in China, and we know that while until a few years ago, the biggest manufacturers were consistently European ones, the latest data for 2023 show that Chinese manufacturers have taken the leadership in terms of volumes. In Europe, most of the supply comes from the EU, so almost the entirety of wind turbines are made by European manufacturers, and also the level of components, the vast majority comes from the EU. But these shares are decreasing, both if you look at the European market, there is a stronger penetration of foreign suppliers, mostly Chinese, but also Indian components. And the global level also, the share of market covered by EU companies has been consistently decreasing. This is partly due to the fact that a big part of the global market is a Chinese market, where European companies are totally absent if we look at the final product. So at the final turbine, they're still active on some specific components, but there are not any more European turbines installed in China. And because China is going very fast, the rate of installation in China has been strong. They cover a big part of the global market. This explains partly the decrease of the European share of global market, but also in part this is due to the fact that Chinese OEMs are being more and more active also in third markets that are not China. So competition there is also increasing. If we can move to the next slide, please. I just wanted to share this map. This comes from WindEurope. It shows where factories active in the wind sector, being it the assembling, so the final equipment manufacturing, but also being components are present in the EU. And as you can see, while the traditional narrative is that we have a few big OEMs and they're located mostly in Spain and in Germany, the reality shows that the factories are actually distributed across Europe in all countries. So this is not an issue that is relevant only for a couple of countries. It's actually relevant for all Europe because the industry is an important industry for the entire continent. And we see that there are plenty of components that are relevant, some of them really specific to wind, some others like cables, not necessarily only specific to wind, but very much linked to wind, especially offshore. So we want to stress the fact that this issue is is a pan-European issue, and the industry, the wind industry, is strategic for the entire continent. Next slide, please. So basically, again, getting back to the initial message, why did we focus on wind? Because we have a bit of paradox in Europe, where we have good perspectives for the future in terms of deployment, very high target, very high ambition. This year and last year, probably deployment was not up to the expectations, but we foresee an acceleration in the future. And this is not just based on our guessing, but it's because there is an increasing number of auctions being done in member states, especially offshore auctions, but not only. Member states took some pledges in terms of deployment for wind, and they showed that there is an increased ambition in terms of wind deployment. If we look at permitting, this is also accelerating. So there is, in a way, a credible expectation that wind deployment will accelerate. At the same time, one would assume that this gives a clear signal to the market, to manufacturers, that demand will come up. In principle, this shows poor investments, but the reality is that all wind turbine manufacturers had losses in 2022. Most of them had also losses in 2023. We have seen some recovery last year and also this year, but the situation is still quite unsure, uncertain, and this requires from our side some action. The reasons behind this crisis of the sector was, first of all, as I mentioned, uncertain demands. On one side, there are clear targets and expectations, but at the same time, demand doesn't seem to be so clear. What we heard from manufacturers is that they cannot afford to make new investments for expanding manufacturing capacity, or even just using at full speed the existing manufacturing capacity, simply because there have been many announcements in the past about increased demand, but this demand didn't materialize. So one element is the insufficient and uncertain demand, mostly due to slow and complex permitting. The second reason, inflation and commodity prices. The situation now is getting back pretty much to normal, but we went through a couple of years in which we have seen a very high price of critical raw materials, very high prices of other materials like steel, for instance, very high transport costs, very high energy costs. So there was a bit this perfect storm that increased greatly the price of wind turbines. And so also some of the contracts between manufacturers and developer were signed before the crisis with prices that then in the end didn't correspond to the actual prices, and these created huge losses for manufacturers. The design of national tenders for renewables also was not considered to be optimal, and this is why we intervene also in this aspect, namely to avoid auctions to be focused solely on price. There is a growing pressure from international competitors, so this also has an impact in eroding the margins for manufacturers. And then another problem that is not maybe so short-term, more medium to long-term, is the availability of skilled workers. Next slide, please. So these are no new elements, so we knew about them last year already when we drafted the Wind Power Action Plan, and somehow some of them had already been addressed. The Wind Power Action Plan follows or was overlapping in a way with many other initiatives that we took. For instance, in the revised Renewable Energy Directive, we tackled permitting, including with emergency regulation on permitting. We were already working at the time on the electricity market design that in the end was finally adopted and entered into force, which aims to provide more predictability and stability of prices, and so also more predictability of demand, and increase the incentives to develop renewables. The Wind Power Action Plan, in a way, was adopted in the context of the Green Deal Industrial Plan, which included initiatives like the Net Zero Industry Act and the Critical Minerals Act, so also addressing some of the issues I mentioned before. There was already the state aid framework, including the temporary crisis and transition framework to stimulate state aid and facilitate the allocation of state aid. The EU, in its funding, was already focusing on manufacturing in the Innovation Fund, but also in other funding, including the RRF, the Recovery and Resilience Fund. And finally, the technical support instrument is another instrument that we provided, for example, to administrative authorities to facilitate permitting and to facilitate dealing with all issues concerning renewables. So there were already actions ongoing, but some of these actions were more medium to long term. This is why, next slide, please, in the Wind Power Action Plan, we decided to focus on 6 key pillars with 15 short-term and very concrete actions. The idea was to really deliver and implement this action in a short time frame so that we could really monitor them and we could really assess their impact. The 6 pillars are accelerating deployment, so to give a signal also to manufacturers the deployment is coming so that they can better plan their investment. Improving auction design so that we don't facilitate in a way while taking care and while, of course, minding about prices, and we all hope the prices also of technologies can go down. We also don't want to have a race to the bottom in which price is the only thing that counts, to the detriment of quality and to the detriment of other important societal benefits like protection of environment, innovation, cybersecurity, etc. We focus on access to finance. I'll get to that more in detail later, what it means. The other pillar was fair and competitive international environment, so trying to redress a bit some imbalances in the competition with foreign suppliers. Skills is the other pillar, so make sure that there are enough workers, specialized workers for the sectors. And finally, the last pillar was the engagement by the industry stakeholders and also by member states, and I'll explain later what this means. So we'll go now, starting from the next slide, to each individual pillar. The first one, as I said, is the acceleration of deployment. I want to start from the picture that you see, the graph that you can see on the left. It's a bit outdated, but still shows a bit the gap, the big discrepancy that we have in the EU between permitting and construction. So there is a big queue for permitting in all member states, and in the vast majority of the cases, this is much wider than the actual construction rate. This might make sense because, of course, not all requests are granted permitting, so it's obvious that you have more requests under permitting than actual construction. But the gap in some cases is really huge. I mean, you can see in Spain, probably this is quite striking. You can see the same in Poland and in other countries. So there is a big problem with permitting. If deployment is not taking place, it's mostly due to permitting, to slow permitting, to complex permitting, sometimes existence of rules that don't allow to deliver the projects. And we know very well that long, slow, and complex permitting means uncertainty. It means also higher cost for developers, and in the end, it means higher cost for the project. It means the developer have to save money somewhere else, potentially trying to get as much as possible in terms of price reduction from equipment manufacturers, for instance. And it means also less competitiveness of renewables. So for us, it's key to address this. And this is why part of the Wind Power Action Plan is this Accelerate initiative, which looks at the speedy and simple permitting through many smaller and more concrete initiatives. First of all, focusing on the speedy implementation of the Renewable Energy Directive. So we already have the rules. We don't have to invent anything. The rules for faster permitting are in the revised RED, and this is why we started a discussion with member states on the implementation of RED, focusing specifically on permitting. Second focus is on digitalization and training. So there also we have some actions on this, and more specifically also using the TSI, the Technical Support Instrument of the European Commission, again for public administration, to focus on digitalization and to focus also on training the staff of permitting authorities. We set up a dedicated online tool to support member states with questions on permitting. So this is partly also related to the implementation of and the transposition of RED, and member states can access it and check it. There are all answers to all questions we have received so far from member states on permitting, so to give them an additional supporting tool that they can help them to accelerate permitting and comply with the Renewable Energy Directive. We adopted in May last year a guidance on permitting and guidance on renewable energy acceleration areas. So also this to facilitate the transposition and implementation by member states. And we also strengthen our cooperation with permitting authorities, especially by strengthening and giving more prominence to an expert group on permitting, which already existed, but we gave it a bit more emphasis and a bit more a key role and a central role. Another aspect that we thought was very important to give a signal to manufacturers was to give more visibility to the project pipeline. And this is why we asked member states to do pledges on wind deployment, which they did last year in December. If I remember correctly, 21 or 22 member states submitted these wind pledges. You can access them online on the Commission website by Googling them. You will find them. And these pledges, they show that there is a commitment from member states. So they took a commitment. A pledge is a pledge. So we consider, we take it very seriously. That the pledge means member states doing whatever they want to live up to the expectations that they provided in the pledges. And these pledges show an increased deployment, especially starting from next year and also in 2026. So we really do expect an accelerated deployment. We created, as European Commission, a digital platform for auctions. You can also access that online, which shows the planned auctions by member states. So this is still in development. It's already operational, but we are trying to improve it with the support of member states. But what is very important, these initiatives are not isolated. Especially, we know that from ENSEC and BEMIC, which are the regional group. ENSEC is the North Sea Energy Cooperation, while BEMIC focuses on the Baltic. There is a strong focus on offshore, and there you can also see they set up instruments to give visibility to the pipeline of auctions. So this is very important because one difficulty the manufacturers have when they want to make investments is to go to financial institutions and ask them for money. And what financial institutions say is that there is no certainty about projects being realized, and showing that there is a big pipeline of auctions, that auctions are coming, that are planned, that there is already financing for these auctions, is an additional instrument that manufacturers can use to get this money, and so to let's say de-risk their investment. We're also working on strengthening regional cooperation. So I mentioned already the example of ENSEC and BEMIC. And then in the NECPs, in the recommendations for NECPs that were published some time ago when we received the first draft NECPs from member states, we put a recommendation for member states in the final draft to focus on a 10 years plan of deployment for wind, so to give high visibility for wind. Finally, still as part of acceleration of deployment, we adopted a grids action plan. I'll not give the detail because it falls outside my remit, but we strengthen also the focus on grids because we all know grids are one of the bottleneck for wind deployment and not only wind. Next slide, please. So the second pillar that I mentioned before is auction design. We realized that auctions based only on price are not the most conducive to to a stable and predictable business environment for wind. So we enter into a dialogue with member states on auction design, and this dialogue led to the adoption of a Commission recommendation and guidance, again, May this year, in which we want to focus on some aspect. We recommended member states to ensure high value for money and to focus on the full and timely execution of projects. And this is very important, fundamental, again, to give stability and predictability. We recommended them to include pre-qualification criteria related to cybersecurity, sustainability, and ability to deliver. And then to strengthen in general non-price award criteria in auction, which some member states are already doing, especially for offshore. And also we ask member states to assess the consequences of negative bidding and of including price ceilings. All of this was also, let's say, further developed in work that we are carrying out related to the Net Zero Industry Act. So at the time of adoption of the Wind Power Action Plan, we were still in negotiation. So our commitment in the Wind Power Action Plan was to include these principles also in the Net Zero Industry Act, which is the case. Article 26 of the Act focuses on non-price criteria in auctions. And we are currently working on an implementing act to define these non-price criteria, which will be adopted hopefully by 30 March 2025. Another action that the Commission is carrying out, this is still ongoing, and if I remember correctly, it has a deadline by sometimes mid next year, is to identify and assess cybersecurity risk relevant to wind energy installations and the related infrastructure. And this is a very important work that the Commission is carrying out, is DG Ener together with other relevant Directorate General of the Commission, to make sure that we identify all the cybersecurity risks that could affect the wind business, again, to make it more secure, stable, and be conducive to the achievement of the targets that we have adopted in our legislation. Finally, the same principles of quality, not focusing only on price and focusing also on wider societal benefits, we want to include them in the public procurement in the context of the Global Gateway. So the Global Gateway is this broad Commission initiatives to support projects in third countries. And then we want also to include this criteria. So relevant DGs are in contact with partners in third countries, with project promoters, to make sure that in the call for tender, they include also some of these principles. Next slide, please. Third pillar is about access to finance, very important. What we did in the Wind Power Action Plan is that we committed to increase the budget of the Innovation Fund Clean Tech Manufacturing window, and this was done because the final budget was 1.4 billion. Not only that, but we also included a specific support mechanism for applicants in the wind sector to get more support in developing their application to get money under the Innovation Fund. And we can say that this worked because in the last call of the Innovation Fund, 6 projects were linked to wind, which is much higher than any previous auction, any previous call of the Innovation Fund. So there is a higher successful rate of wind applications, and we are very happy about that. Another very successful instrument also already implemented is the EIB counter guarantee to the risk investments in wind projects. And I understand colleagues will talk more in detail about this later, so I'm not providing more information on this. We also ask member states, so this action is ready for member states to implement, but to keep making full use of the flexibility that is provided under stated rules. So we didn't have to do anything new because there is already plenty of flexibility for member states to provide support for wind manufacturing, for clean tech manufacturing in general, but we asked member states to do so. And then we also strengthened the dialogue with investors, and this very meeting is part of this increased engagement with investors and with stakeholders in general in wind to make sure that there is a better investment environment in the wind sector. Next slide for the fourth pillar, which is about a fair and competitive international environment. We didn't create anything new, but the Commission committed to continue carrying out actions in this sector, mostly to facilitate the EU manufacturer access to foreign markets via trade agreement, but also by using existing trade instruments, including the international procurement instrument, but also by continuing the dialogue with third countries. And I can quote, for instance, recent successful outcome with Taiwan. Taiwan was including some rules on local content. I don't know the details, but there is a press release that you can consult. So if you Google it, you'll find information. Some local content requirement, which would damage our company. So that's why we enter into a dialogue with Taiwan, and they committed to change the rules. So this is another successful example of how these commitments in the Wind Power Action Plan was carried out. But second, we also not only we focus on accessing third markets, but we also focus on protecting our internal market against trade distortions and threat to security and public order. And there are several instruments that the Commission can use. One of these is the foreign subsidies regulation. And also here there was a concrete action from the Commission. The Commission started a pre-investigation on what could be potentially illegal foreign subsidies in wind projects in Europe. This pre-assessment, let's say, focus on several member states, so there is a wide scope, a geographical level, and we understand that this already is bearing some fruits. It's already giving some results in terms of disincentivizing the use of technologies that could be subsidized through illegal foreign subsidies. We also make full use, as usual, of the foreign direct investment screening regulation, so to make sure that there is no foreign direct investment that could put in jeopardy our security, our economic security. And then we also promote international standards in the wind sector, because we think this is a key initiative for facilitating access to our technologies abroad, if our standards are also translated into international standards. Next slide, please. On skills, very importantly, we created the large-scale skills partnership for renewable energy and for offshore renewable energy. So this was already, these were both active at the time. But what we did is that the partnership mapping the skill needs in the sector, and most importantly, the partnership for renewable energy applied for getting support under the Erasmus Plus program, so to get support for creating a blueprint of skills in the wind sector, in the renewable energy sector, covering also, of course, wind, which will be very important to have a better understanding of skill problems, and also to develop and identify the initiatives that are necessary to make sure that we don't have a shortage of skilled workers in the wind sector. In the context of the Net Zero Industry Act, also, we are working on creating net zero academies, including an academy for wind. So also two key initiatives, again, maybe not so relevant in the short term, but important in the long term, and to ensure also that there will be sufficient availability of skilled workers when deployment will accelerate and manufacturing will have also to accelerate accordingly. Finally, next slide, the last pillar that I mentioned already is engagement of industry and member states. What we did is to propose them to enter into a wind charter, so to sign a wind charter. The Commission was not a signatory to the charter, because the charter simply invites member states and wind industry to align with the actions of the Wind Power Action Plan, to implement them whenever those actions pertain to the industry or to member states. And the idea was to demonstrate a common and coordinated effort between us, Commission, member states, and the industry, so that by signing the charter, member states and industry show support to the Wind Power Action Plan, and more specifically commit to implement some of its actions. And I can say, on the side, for instance, of member states, we have seen some of these actions. We have seen several cases of accelerated deployment, accelerated permitting. We have seen cases in which strong support financially has been given in the context of state aid, so by making use of the flexibility provided under state aid. On the side of industry, we have seen some new investments in manufacturing capacity. We would like to see more. We think more is needed if we want to make sure that the European supply of technologies can match the upcoming demand. Otherwise, inevitably, we will have to rely more on imports, and this could, of course, while we don't, of course, exclude imports, and we believe in open trade, and we believe in the fact that imports and trade increases competitiveness. At the same time, we need to make sure that trade happens because we want it, because it's convenient, and not just because we are not able to increase our manufacturing capacity. And that's why the industry committed in the Wind Power Action Plan to step up investments and ensure the expansion of manufacturing capacity in order to meet the increased demand. Again, we take the Wind Charter very seriously. We expect both member states and industry to live up to these commitments. I think this was my last slide, if I remember correctly. So this is all for my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Alessandro. And before we take questions, and I see there's already some in the chat, I would like to give the floor to Guy Brindley from WindEurope, who will give us a bit of a feel of how effective the action plan has been with the latest investment trends in the wind sector. And then I will open the Q&A. And Guy, if you can also start by introducing yourself briefly, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me and you can see me. My camera seems to be working. That's good. Yes, my pleasure. Guy Brindley. I'm the head of market intelligence at WindEurope. And following that really insightful presentation from Alessandro, I'm just going to try and give an idea of where we are in terms of investments, both in manufacturing and also in terms of wind energy projects. So yeah, let's go to the first slide, please. So in the last 2 years, we've seen investments of 11 billion in Europe's manufacturing supply chain. This is, if you click next, sorry, there's a couple of animations here. Yeah, so 5.5 billion of that has been in manufacturing, with a further 3.3 billion in ports and another 2.1 billion investments in vessels. These, I'd have to say, are at least 11 billion, because in many cases you won't actually have the amounts that are announced, but this is what we think. I had a look at the figures, and essentially there were just 3 of these from 2022. So of the 36 announcements, 33 of them are in 2023 and 2024, and that's about 10.3 billion worth. So 5.5 billion is a large amount, obviously, and manufacturing is quite broad. So if you click again twice, I reckon, yes, see where the breakdown is here, and you can see the majority of the investment in manufacturing in Europe. These investments are coming into cables, which is around about 3.1 billion, and foundations around 1.2 billion. But apart from that, there's a big spread. It's a good start, and it's an important start, but as Alessandro mentions, we think we need quite a lot more to meet the capacity set out the Net Zero Industry Act, which is around about 36 gigawatts a year, is the which we want European manufacturers to be able to deliver on. If we go to the next slide, we'll see where these investments have taken place. So following the map before of where the facilities are located, here's a map illustrating where the latest investments have taken place, including here the nacelle blade manufacturing facility in Szczecin in Poland from Vestas, which we expect to employ around 1,700 people. And in here also Siemens Energy are looking to employ further 4,000 for grid equipment manufacturing. I mentioned previously, grids is becoming the biggest bottleneck. Permitting has been holding back wind energy deployment for a while, but of course investments in manufacturing need to happen as soon as possible. There's also examples here of the EIB, not just in the counter guarantee, but supporting wind energy. So, for example, in Prysmian, a cable manufacturer, they've supported the expansion of 3 facilities in Finland, Italy, and France here to increase cable manufacturing capacity. But you can see it's these investments are happening all over Europe, and it's extremely timely. If we move on to how this is being seen on the ground level, so to speak, we have here the offshore wind farm final investment decisions so far this year. I seem to have omitted the commissioning date for Orange Wind. I think that's around early 2028. That's expected to come online. So we can see 2.7 gigawatts here financed this year, which is, and I'll show in a bit how that matches with previous years. But it's worth mentioning here, with offshore wind, there's such large projects that one or two taking place in 1 year or another really have a massive impact. Here we're seeing, I estimate, around 8 billion in investments. This is based on previous investments for wind farms in these various markets. But all of this, as you see, taking place in the EU. So let's have a look how that compares with previous years. Here I've put the investments in new wind farms over the last 10 years. And if you just click once, the year-to-date figure will pop up there. Thanks very much. Yeah. So 2.7 gigawatts, as I mentioned, and 7.9 billion. Well, we're fairly confident on at least one more, potentially two, but this could mean that we reach around 4.2 gigawatts and 14 billion of investment in the EU offshore wind. So that would, I think that would constitute quite a good year based on previous. But as I'll show you later, still quite a long way off from what needs to be invested in order to meet the targets. So let's look at onshore now. This is the situation. For context, and as Alessandra mentioned, WindEurope here, we're using a slightly lower figure, but the magnitude is similar. So we think we need 33 gigawatts a year of wind to meet targets at 2030. And I expect around 23 gigawatts of that to be onshore. So you can already see we're quite some way behind. But if you look at where we are so far in the first 3 quarters of 2024, so you need to click again, please. We are here. So 7.7 gigawatts of onshore final investment decisions, raising around 10.5 billion. And very simply, if I pro-rata that up, we get to around 10 gigawatts by the end of the year and about 14 billion in investments. So, okay, quite solid, but as you'll see in this chart, it's quite a long way off. So this is the combined situation in the EU. One click will give us where we are Q1 to Q3, and if those estimates I said before were to come to fruition, it would be 29 billion by the end of the year and around 14 gigawatts. But here, this is what the investment really needs to be in order to meet 33 gigawatts a year. This does take into account around about 25 gigawatts of older projects being taken offline as well. So you need to replace those. And I've very simply assumed an average investment per megawatt for offshore of 3 and for onshore of 1. So you could say it could be. It's just to give an illustration of where we are to date and where we need to be over the next 6 or 7 years. Finally, I just thought I'd put into context this position in the whole of Europe. So I'm just including UK, Norway, etc. You can see UK has a massive impact on offshore wind, obviously, but that figure of 52.5 billion is basically like the same as the whole of Europe has been in previous years. So we basically need to add a UK-sized hole in the EU investments in order to reach our goals. But that's all I think I'll say for now, and I'm happy also to take questions.
Thank you very much. Thanks again, to our two presenters for the very insightful presentations. And by Balázs Zorényi on the counter guarantee product created by EIB under the action plan. Balázs, if you're ready, then I will give you the floor and maybe ask for a short introduction. The starting point.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I was not here in the very beginning of this meeting, but I followed the last 15-20 minutes. So what I will do is I will give you an overview on the EIB counter guarantee product. So focusing on one of the action points that are in the wind power action plan. I mean, we can probably move directly to the next slide. So to set the scene, I just put here a quote from Commission President von der Leyen. When this is a quote from the State of the Union speech in 23, when she announced this action plan, and she already mentioned that access to finance is an area that we need to work on. Then we can move to the next slide where I have Action 8, which is about the EIB counter guarantee product for the wind companies. I mean, the action plan came out just 1 month after the announcement by the president. So it was very good and cooperation with the EIB. It was all very fast, and it is a good example, I think, to show that we can develop a specific product, a tailored solution to a problem in a very short time. As you heard before, this is not the only point on financing. There are other points such as the expansion on the use of EU funds, state aid, and also the investors dialogue, which is mentioned in the action plan itself. So what is put here in this paragraph, I think, very well, is why we are acting on the financial side with this specific product, and what is it exactly that we want to do. So what you can see is, if you read the second part of this paragraph, is that there is financial pressure, which results from the growing order book. We have an expansion in the wind sector, as we can clearly see. We have very ambitious targets. We need to move even to higher levels of deployment, and there is a frequent need for the provision of upfront guarantees for advance payments. And as you can see, this is happening in a macroeconomic environment which is challenging, with inflation, with supply chain disruptions, and so on. And then, as I said, it also tells exactly what we want to do, which is to counter guarantee the commercial bank's credit exposure, to work with key wind industry players, and increasing access to advance payments and performance guarantee lines. Then, if we move to the next slide, we can see the EIB product itself and the impact that the product will have on the wind sector. So this product came out in December, so just 3 months after the announcement by the president, and 2 months after the publication of the Wind Power Action Plan. So this is a 5 billion euro lending envelope. What it means is that this is kind of a framework operation by the EIB with a maximum amount of resources to be spent in the framework of this product to support the wind manufacturing sector. It is estimated that this 5 billion euro will have a very high leverage factor, and it will result in additional investments of 80 billion euros and an increased capacity of 32 gigawatts. On the chart, it is explained how the scheme works. So you have the EIB providing the counter guarantee instrument to selected commercial banks that work with wind manufacturers. The commercial banks can give guarantee products with the use of this counter guarantee, and these are needed by the project promoters who need to provide advance payments for wind farm deployments. The novelty of this package is that before this instrument, the EIB and also other banks, and I mean the national promotional banks, development banks as well, focused on the project financing side, financing the wind farms, financing project promoters, and not so much focused on the manufacturing side, which, as I explained before, we saw that there is a specific issue to tackle. If you move to the next slide, which is the last one, this is where I have a couple of bullet points about the current progress under this package. As you can see, there are 2 operations that have already been signed with the commercial banks, which now have the possibility to contract with wind manufacturers. I don't have information, unfortunately, about contracts made by the commercial banks. What I can say is that the first operation was signed with Deutsche Bank for an amount of 500 million, which is the maximum for one single operation, and this may trigger investments up to 8 billion euros. The Deutsche Bank operation is financed purely through EIB's own resources. And as you can see, for the second operation with the Intesa Sanpaolo, there is a similar setup, similar amounts, 500 million euros to trigger 8 billion investments. But there, InvestEU also plays a role. With InvestEU, this product also shows that this is an instrument which is very flexible, very adaptable. We have set up there a framework where a broad range of policies and a broad range of beneficiaries are eligible. And in a couple of months, we were able to develop a product which can benefit also from InvestEU financing. And then I have 3 other operations mentioned, which are approved operations, but they are not yet signed. Approved meaning that they have been approved by the EIB, and for some of them there has also been an approval by the InvestEU Investment Committee, meaning that it's not only the Intesa Sanpaolo operation, but also other operations are expected to benefit from the InvestEU guarantee. And these banks are Société Générale, BNP Paribas, and HSBC. We know that there are more operations in the pipeline. I don't have the exact figures for those which are approved but not yet signed, but I think we are over 2 billion euros with the EIB financing, compared with the 5 billion envelope. And as we know from EIB, there is interest in the product. So I think we have a good chance that the 5 billion envelope will be fully utilized soon. I would say by sometime next year. So that was my short presentation. I'm happy to answer other questions.
Thank you very much, Balázs.